Precision Opinions Live, and I am Christian Stella, Pharm D, here today with Dianna Rosencrantz. And Dianna Rosencrantz was here for a month. We had the privilege of getting to know her and having her work besides us. She currently works at Walgreens, correct?
Yep.
And Pharm D candidate.
Yes.
So pharmacist is coming right around the corner.
Yep.
But during our rotation, what we were looking into very heavily was thyroid, and that was something we're both very passionate about. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a breeze through on thyroid. So first, we'll start it up. Explain what thyroid is. For most people, it doesn't make sense for the most part. They know of thyroid, they've heard of thyroid, but what does thyroid do to you? And what is the condition, if you can explain that?
Right. So the thyroid is basically a butterfly-shaped organ located at the front of your neck, and it's very important in metabolic stability. So it actually has a number of different functions. It can help with metabolism, proper organ function, even maintaining muscle and bone strength. And in children, it's important for development and growth. Now, there are two conditions called hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism. So hyperthyroidism is when you have an overactive thyroid, and there's actually a number of signs and symptoms. So I do have a little list because there are just so many.
You can read off the list because there's way too many.
Yeah, there's a lot. So just some include bulging eyes, sweating, having an enlarged thyroid, and that's known as a goiter. Rapid heartbeat, weight loss, muscle weakness, anxiety and irritability, or even an irregular menstrual cycle. And then when it comes to hypothyroidism or an underactive thyroid, you can have drier, coarse hair, a puffy face, also a goiter, slowed heart rate, weight gain, brittle nails, fatigue, frequent and heavy menstrual periods, or even cold intolerance.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's pretty much yin and yang. It's up and down, trying to find a balance. Some people produce too much thyroid, some people produce too little, and it's based on how your body regulates it. And pretty much it could be autoimmune in some situations. So how do doctors figure this out? Like, they're gonna look at some labs, obviously, and what are they looking for?
Yeah, so they measure 3 different hormones, the TSH, T3, and T4. The TSH is called the thyroid stimulating hormone, and what that does is it's released by the pituitary gland to trigger and stimulate the thyroid to release those thyroid hormones known as T4 and T3. When there's too much TSH, that means that the pituitary gland senses that there's not enough hormones being made, so it's trying to trigger and stimulate that thyroid to release more of the hormones. So it's showing that the thyroid is underactive. It's not releasing enough. And on the other end of the spectrum, there's low levels of TSH, which means that the thyroid is
It'd be too much T4.
Yeah, there's too much T4 and T3, so it's just overactive. It's working too much. It's not listening to the pituitary gland. It's just working on its own. Now, T4 and T3 are those hormones that are released by the thyroid, and actually T4 gets converted into T3, making T3 basically the active component of the thyroid.
Exactly. Yeah, so there's free forms, there's total forms. So you'll see on a lab it might say free or total. Free just means that it's floating through the bloodstream. It's not attached to anything like a protein. But yeah, it's kind of like the pituitary and the TSH is, when it gets high, it's calling out to the body. It's like, let's produce more thyroid. Let's produce it. And nothing's happening because the thyroid, the T4 and the T3 are low, which is interesting. Now, when we find this patient and we do all the labs, and there are some antibodies that we can draw too to see if it is autoimmune. Now, when we see this and we have a patient that does have hypo, what are the medications we're seeing for hypo? Like, one of them is armor thyroid or porcine thyroid, thyroid USP. Explain that one.
So yeah, that's actually an all-natural medication because it's actually extracted from the thyroid glands of pigs, and it contains both T4 and T3, actually 80% T4 and 20% T3. And we do compound that here in the pharmacy. We make it in capsule form. So basically we have a pile of the powder, and we actually take the capsule shells and we use this punching method. So we punch the capsules into the powder and pack it in tight, close up the capsule, and it's ready for the patient to use.
Something they teach you in pharmacy school. Punch. Yeah, so I mean, the advantage of getting it compounded is we can use completely no fillers sometimes, or just one filler. So if a patient is allergic, we can use beet powder, ginger root powder, even vitamin C. So whatever they want and whatever they feel comfortable with and their body responds properly to, we can use as a filler, which is nice. Mm-hmm. What about T4? So Synthroid.
Yeah, so T4 is actually made synthetically in a lab. It's a synthetic bioidentical, so it's
pretty much made synthetically in a lab to be the exact same hormone that everyone produces.
Yes, and actually, if you undertreat with this medication, that can cause coronary heart disease. But if you overtreat with this medication, that can actually cause atrial fibrillation or even decreased bone quality that could possibly result in fractures. But if all is well and the levels go within range, you should see symptoms improve within 2 to 3 weeks, but that's not really going to be reflected in the labs until about a month later.
Yeah, perfect. Mm-hmm. Now, the last one is T3. Mm-hmm. T3, same thing, right? Synthetic.
Yeah, it's synthetic. There actually isn't a lot of information out there about T3 simply because when it is taken orally, it gets broken up in the gut and it's no longer active and it can't do its job. That's why T4 is a little bit more common because it won't become inactive just like that because it gets converted to its active component.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So some patients, what we do in the compounding lab to get them that T3, because T3 is the active form. T4 converts into T3, and some patients don't convert properly. So we need to give them that T3. And what we'll do is we'll make a capsule. We'll use our punch method, and we'll use something called Methicel and make it sustain release so it can kind of get through the gut properly, and they can have active T3 on board. But that's pretty much it when it comes down to compounding. We can help these patients because thyroid, the therapeutic index is very small, and there's a lot we could do to help patients that have allergies as well. So I want to thank you, Dianna, for coming on. I want to thank you for all your help throughout the rotation, and good luck in the future. All right.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Be sure to search Precision Opinions Live on Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, and Google Pods. And make sure to follow Precision Pharmacy on Instagram, Facebook, and all other social media platforms.